Okay, I wanted to do this video like last week, but I kept getting distracted. So what was originally intended to be like a review of Arrow 100 is now kind of a review of Arrow 100, a kind of a theory of what's going to happen in the second half of the season due to this week's episode. First of all, I'm probably going to start with the things that I liked about Arrow 100 because I don't want to just be one of those people that just like dives into all the shitty stuff without giving credit where credit is due, I guess. I haven't watched any of Arrow since 417, but I watched the 100th because they were saying for so long that because it's a huge milestone, it was important to them that this episode would be a huge culmination of everything that they'd done so far. And, the show was good for 2.5 seasons, and it's bad for 1.5 seasons. So, in terms of the show as a whole, like, the good definitely outweighed the bad, and I wanted to see them kind of bring all that together. And I thought that if I was going to watch Arrow again, I wanted it to be an episode that would be a throwback to the show that I loved. So I watched the 100th for that. They kept saying how it was going to be this like love letter to the fans of the whole show from the beginning, and I guess that was interesting to me. So I streamed it afterwards, and yeah, I mean, there were still things that I didn't like about it, but there was definitely stuff that I did. I will say though that I think one of the best things about the episode for me was Steven's performance. Like, I feel like he can be a little hit and miss, but I also think that like most actors are only as good as the people that they're playing off of. And I think that some actors have specific types of scenes that they are good at. Steven said at a convention recently how some of his favorite scenes to do are the ones that have like the long dialogue, and the conversations. Like, he said that some of the scenes that he did with Laurel in season 1, where there was a little bit of back and forth and a little bit like, you kind of dug a little bit deeper. And I think you could tell that in the 100th, because I think, it was a very emotional thing, but it was also very, very understated because, they couldn't openly be freaking out and panicking because they were in this setting where hardly anyone would understand why they were panicking. So everything was kind of really muted, but you could still see it. It was really, they were trying to be like low key about it. It was very emotional without being dramatic, which I really, really loved. And I think that Steven did really, really well in that. And it was definitely my favourite performance of his in a really long time. I also loved Thea, and I loved the fact that, she's the youngest of the team. I mean, she's only in like her early 20s now, and she was like 17 when the show started. And I think it's not often that we're reminded of how young she actually is. So I love the fact that she was in a lot of ways the most vulnerable of them. Like, she just wanted her parents back, she wanted her life back, she wanted Laurel back, because Laurel took her in. She was living with Laurel when Laurel died. Laurel was there for her more than Oliver was a lot throughout the show, and I think that Thea did feel a little bit lost without her parents and without Laurel because they'd taken care of her. And I thought it was really, really, like, I got choked up when Thea was talking about wanting to stay. So I think that I think that Willow's performance was awesome as well. I love the fact that this dream Oliver, after getting his memories back, acknowledged the fact that he'd always treated Laurel quite poorly. I loved that because I could never really get behind shipping Laurel and Oliver because he didn't really have a lot of respect for her, and it was okay for him to do things but not okay for her to do things, and he undermined her a lot. And she's far more educated than he is. She's a lot more intelligent. She has a temperament that is a lot better for dealing with people, and she could have been an asset. In one way or another, she was definitely an asset to the team, and he often, especially in season 3, he was very cold to her and just dismissed her as if she was worth nothing if he didn't think that, and yeah, I couldn't get behind shipping Oliver and Laurel because I don't think that he was very good to her at all. And that was really upsetting for me because I grew up, like, the reason I got into comic books is because I watched like the Teen Titans animated series and the Justice League Unlimited when I was like 9 years old. So I don't really remember a time when I didn't know Green Arrow and Black Canary. So having a version of them that I didn't like together was like, I mean, that's kind of when you know that you've kind of failed. When you can't, like, they're a DC power couple. Like, could you imagine a Superman movie where like Clark treated Lois like shit? I love the fact that Oliver acknowledged that he hadn't treated her well and that she deserved better than that. Because I think that in terms of Oliver's character going forward in the show, having that experience, it kind of forced him into a situation where he needed to kind of self-reflect, and he had to look back on all the things that could have been had he not done some of the things that he'd done in his life. And I thought that was really important for Oliver's character, and I think it was good that even though it was the huge crossover event, I love that the Arrow episode was very much about Oliver. It was very much about the things that he'd lost and the position that he was in his life, and just how much of that was his fault versus how much of it was just like a product of circumstance. So yeah, I love the whole self-reflection on Oliver's part, and I think that if they do utilize that going forward in the show, and if Laurel does come back for good, and Oliver is able to use that self-reflection and build on himself and treat her a little bit better, I think that maybe I could learn to ship them, and then I would get the Green Arrow and Black Canary that I've wanted. But at this moment in time, I don't ship them, and I just want Black Canary to be well respected. The fight scenes were pretty cool. I loved the all the different villains from the different seasons making cameos. I thought that was a really interesting thing and a really interesting roadblock. But I know that they're hallucinations and therefore not as strong as they would have been. But because these are like mental roadblocks that have been conjured up based on what the aliens have found in their brains, basically they should be projections of these people as like Oliver and Sarah and Diggle remember them to be, because they're images of them taken from within their subconscious. So it didn't really make sense to me that Sarah took out Slade with like one hit, because if this is a projection of how you remember Slade to be, like, you were on that island with him, you know how ruthless he is, you spent all of season 2 trying to take him down, and then, oh, it's like, oh yeah, one stab, he's done. I guess it was an interesting cameo, but I think it just, I don't know, I think it didn't carry any weight beyond being a cameo. But yeah, the fight scenes are pretty cool. The joint attacks. I mean, I love the little Supergirl and Flash joint attack they did, and the little high five. That was cool. But I also think that the scenes that weren't in the illusion, like Supergirl and Flash and Team Arrow, were kind of ineffective. Like, every time that it cut to them, I was just like, okay, this is happening, and they were kind of lost in the larger picture of the episode. But then again, I also guess that this is Arrow100, and a lot of people were skeptical because of the crossover, and they thought the crossover would overshadow Arrow100, but it didn't. It definitely felt like this is an episode to cement everything that Arrow has achieved, and I definitely got that. So I can totally forgive Flash and Supergirl being kind of written off a little bit, because this is supposed to be Arrow's moment. What else is on my list? Cisco. I loved Cisco kind of taking the reins from Team Arrow a little bit, because it annoys me when Felicity shows up in Flash episodes and essentially just does Cisco's job. Like, Cisco is my favorite character on The Flash, and I think that, you know, he is just as, if not more intelligent than Felicity in a different field. So when, like, Barry and Caitlin made that quip about Felicity being better than him, and when Felicity came to Star Labs and just took over Cisco's computer because, oh, I can't be away from a keyboard, oh my god. And I'm just like, dude, he's an actual Flash character. Let him do his job on his own show. So that really grates me, because it's always Cisco or Caitlin that seems to be pushed aside so that Felicity can take over whenever she's in the Flash. So I love the fact that Cisco got to kind of take the reins a little bit in Arrow, because, I mean, they owe him that much. And I also loved how, like, Barry and Kara and Cisco, who are, like, huge, massive dorks, right? They all just kind of, like, were side-eyeing Mr. Terrific's bad jokes. That was hilarious. Yeah, because I haven't watched Arrow since 417, Arrow100 was actually my first introduction to the new recruits, aside from what I'd seen, like, on social media. But, like, I was expecting, I don't know, I only saw him, like, in his costume, right? And, I don't know, this Ragman and the costume, I was expecting him to be, like, middle-aged. I don't even know why, but I don't know, I was expecting him to be middle-aged, and then he was in the Arrow Cave, and I was like, oh my god, he's, like, 12. Like, I wasn't, he's cute, and I love him, and, like, from the very little that I saw of him in the episode, he's probably my favorite of the new recruits. But I don't know, I was just expecting him to be older, and it kind of threw me for a loop that he looked so young. But Curtis is wasted on this show. I mean, last season he was essentially, like, I felt like they were gearing him up to be Felicity's replacement, right? Because at the time we didn't know who would be in the grave, and there were a lot of theories floating around for, like, so many different characters, and because Curtis showed up, one of the leading theories that it would be Felicity in the grave was based on the fact that Curtis was essentially, like, her replacement. He was doing things that she would normally be doing, and they had the same sense of humor, they worked in the same place, they had the same skill set, and they were literally, like, he was like Felicity 2.0. He was like a black gay male Felicity. And it didn't make sense last season to have two of the same character, essentially. So everyone thought, okay, Felicity's gonna die because they've brought in Curtis, and Curtis is essentially her equivalent, right? So they can dispose of Felicity and get Curtis in, and, you know, that'll be it. But when they didn't do that, I was kind of, I mean, I stopped watching Arrow, but I was kind of thinking to myself, I was like, well, where does he fit now? What does he do? Because he made that microchip to cure paralysis, and they literally never went anywhere with it. Like, Felicity was going on about how she's going to mass produce it so that she can be a beacon of hope, and I'm like, whoa, Curtis did that. Like, what the fuck? But they didn't even do that. Like, everything that Curtis did last season is now completely irrelevant, essentially. And Curtis actually kind of kicked ass last season. Like, he held his own in a fight against Roy Harper, when he was unarmed and, you know, dressed in a suit. Like, Curtis definitely was able to hold his own, and then this season he comes into the Arrow Cave and he's completely useless, and now he's just Felicity 2.0, to the point where I don't see the benefit of having them both, because they don't offer anything individually that the other one couldn't also provide. So they're redundant when they're there together, and I don't get it. Why would you bring him in just to make him a Felicity clone if you're going to keep her there too? Like, I'm not saying that either one of them, like, I know that people love them, which is fair enough, right? You can love characters, that's cool, but, like, you've got to acknowledge that they're basically the same. They basically do the same shit. And it's kind of like, when you've got, one of the big problems with Arrow is that there's too many characters anyway. So when you're trying to share screen time between that many characters, then some of them will fall to the wayside and some of their developments will be hindered by others. And that was what I thought would be a huge issue with season 5 anyway. Because they killed Black Canary because they said they had too many masks. And then they brought in, like, 4 more. And none of them have really had that much, like, individual development. And Curtis and Felicity are, like, the same. Like, I don't get it. Why would you do that? Why would you say, oh yeah, we're killing Black Canary because there's too many masks, but let's bring in this guy who's exactly the same as Felicity? And, like, let's bring in another DA who can do Laurel's exact job, but, you know, we have no more stories for her, but we have this guy that could definitely have the same story as her. Like, I don't get it. Yeah. Wild Dog, I didn't like him. Like, I found him to be really arrogant and really rude unnecessarily. Like, it's all well and good being kind of cocky and kind of arrogant when you know your shit. Barry and Kara never did anything to warrant that. It was like just animosity for the sake of animosity, and I thought it was really rude. And I don't know what his deal is, but he needs to get over himself. So I didn't like that, but like I said, my introduction to the recruits is based purely on this one episode, and they were a very small part of the episode. But what I will say about Wild Dog is the actor, I don't know the actor's name, but he was really good. I would go so far as to say he was probably, like, my favorite actor among the new recruits, because I totally, like, even though I didn't like that he was so arrogant, I totally bought his performances. Like, I totally believed that he was, like, offended by Barry's existence. So yeah, I didn't like the character, but the actor was really good. And my exact note on Felicity that I put on my list says, Felicity was tolerable, I guess. I rolled my eyes a little bit, but I wasn't too annoyed by her that I was distracted. I think that Emily's delivery was a little bit off at the beginning because she spoke so fast and without inflection that it took me a second or two to even understand what she said. The frantic and supposed to be awkward babbling is getting a little bit out of hand, and it takes away from what could be compelling dialogues. And I think what bothered me the most is the hallucinations at the end. And my note on the hallucinations was, I don't understand why Roy and Felicity were hallucinations, because if Oliver was seeing hallucinations of people that he lost, like Moira, Robert, and Tommy and Laurel, and they were placed there with the intention of reeling him back into a world where he would still have them, why were Roy and Felicity there? Roy isn't dead, and Felicity is still around, and he didn't have either of them in his dream reality anyway, so why would hallucinations of them in any way influence his decision to go or stay? I'm sure that there were countless other ways that they could have thrown in a Roy cameo. Those Roy and Felicity hallucinations seemed incredibly shoehorned and totally out of place amidst the other characters in the hallucination lineup. Another thing that I had issues with is the plot. It seemed very choppy, but I genuinely don't think that's Arrow's fault. I felt like they tried to force a crossover. On the one hand, I totally respect that it's kind of awesome to have a crossover coincide with their milestone, because if not for Arrow, the crossover wouldn't be possible. I mean, I know that Smallville started the superhero trend on the network, but Arrow was the first show in this universe. Like, it was the first time that these shows were in a position where they could cross over. So I think that it is a testament to Arrow's, like, everything that Arrow has achieved to have a crossover take place on a milestone. But on the other hand, I think that the writing was choppy, the plot was forced. Like, very little of it made sense. In terms of just, like, the aliens, I don't know, I feel like, why were they in space? The only reason they were in, like, why would they just be abducted and just, like, hanging around in space, and then it was shoehorned in to make up for Legends, and then, like, and the Smoke Technologies building makes no sense. Like, it genuinely makes no sense. Because, I mean, it would have made more sense if the Felicity Smoke of that reality actually owned the building, right? But then Ray is like, oh, Felicity said she never owned a building. Oh yeah, right, there's a giant fucking skyscraper in the middle of this fictional world that we've all magically conjured up, but she doesn't know what it is. Like, what? That's stupid, because the Felicity that they saw was not the Felicity from the real world. It was the Felicity that existed in that plane of existence. She is literally a part of that scape. Like, yeah, like, in conclusion, overall, I think that the good definitely outweighed the bad. I did generally, like, enjoy the show, like, that episode. I think that it did kind of highlight some of the good things from the prior seasons. I think that, you know, the little like fourth wall break about Tommy was really cool. I don't really like the fact that they basically reduced Laurel to a love interest. Like, I don't know what this thing is with them recently, because if you actually think about the story of the show so far, Laurel hasn't had or been a love interest since early season 2. Like, she was, like, there was that bizarre, like, Oliver, Tommy, Laurel thing going on in season 1. And then, Tommy died at the end of season 1, and Laurel spent most of season 2 going through a depression, going through addiction, being, like, cast aside by everyone and everything. And Oliver basically walked away from her. Her parents were too busy focusing on Sarah. Sarah was too busy banging Oliver again. Like, Laurel didn't have any kind of romantic interest in season 2 at all. The only romantic thing there was the residual guilt over Tommy. So if you think about it, Laurel didn't have a romantic interest since... She hasn't had a romantic interest since arguably season 2 if you include grieving Tommy. So the fact that they tried to reduce her to a love interest on her deathbed, and they brought her back for the 100th as a one-episode shoehorned love interest, with no inclination that she would ever have any hope of being more than that, aside from a canary necklace, like, not a fan. But, you know, I also think that despite the fact I wish that there was more substance there, I also think that for Oliver's character, because Oliver is the protagonist, I think this was a really, really good move, because I think it does allow him a lot of self-reflection, which could lead into some interesting developments for him in the upcoming episodes. So focusing on Oliver's character and what that world meant to him, I think that it is a really, really good thing to explore, because this is essentially, you know, this is everything that I could have had if I'd treated my girlfriend better. Like, this is everything that I could have had if I wasn't a cheating sleazeball, basically. Yeah, going on to this week's episode, I didn't watch it. I woke up this morning and people were messaging me on Tumblr. I get that a lot. Like, people come to me on Tumblr with, like, their Arrow bitterness, and it, like, validates me. But, yeah, people messaged me on Tumblr and were like, oh my god, did you see this week's Arrow? Arrow is great again, blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, right, do I bite? But then I was scrolling through, and I saw spoilers. I saw a post by a comic book fan who said that they were optimistic about something that Steven had said on Facebook Live. So I watched his Facebook Live. He spoiled the entire episode, which I didn't really care about because I wasn't really going to watch it. And he warned for spoilers anyway. So he spoiled it and said that Laurel came back, and that was kind of, like, he said that that was how the episode ended, right? So I was like, okay, I'll bite. And I watched the last 10 to 15 minutes of the episode. Like, I literally, like, fast-forwarded to the part where Oliver killed Detective Malone. I thought that was an interesting twist. It was a good throwback to season 1. I'd never seen any single scene with Detective Malone in it, so I didn't really have an opinion on him anyway. So it kind of, the death didn't really affect me, aside from being an interesting twist that I wouldn't have seen coming had I watched the episode live. But, you know, Curtis and, is it Paul, his husband? Them breaking up. Actually, I got really emotional about that. Like, I didn't even watch Arrow, and I was just, like, really emotional about it. But I'm also thinking, right, is this going to be either A, the motivation that Curtis needs to become the Mr. Terrific that he should be, and therefore outgrow this kind of Felicity clone persona that they've instilled him in, or is it motivation for him to walk away? I think that that is definitely going to be the turning point, where either he walks away and he leaves the team, or he becomes bigger and better and stronger than he is, which will solve my earlier why are there two Felicities problem. So even though I got really emotional about that, I think that that was something that needed to happen. Oh, well, what else happened? I was like, I forgot already. I watched it like 20 minutes ago. What? Uh, God, what happened? Oh yeah, Oliver kissed that woman who I literally, this is like my first introduction to her too. She seemed okay, but I'm like suspicious of every single love interest that shows up in Arrow now because like they either die or they're evil. Like it's getting a bit repetitive, but yeah, she seemed okay. I mean, she basically told Oliver the same shit that Thea told him, but you know. Diggle, that was pretty cool. I'm excited to see what's going on with Diggle. And I thought that though, like when Lila called him and he was in the like the Arrow Cave or whatever. When Lila called him, I was like, "Whoa, she doesn't sound upset. She doesn't sound scared. Like she doesn't sound like there is something wrong with her baby." Like she sounded kind of robotic, and I'm like, "Whoa, that sounds like it's a recorded message, guys. I mean, really, like either she's a shit actress or there's something going on." Yeah, like I'm excited about that because I love Diggle. Like Diggle's one of my favorite Arrow characters because I think he's the only original character on Arrow who's actually original. Like I could see him, like I know that they've kind of added him to Green Arrow Rebirth, but to be perfectly honest, I think that he would fit better in a Suicide Squad comic. Like I love that Diggle does not need Oliver in any way, shape or form to be relevant. I love the fact that there are very, very few or any other comic book characters that I can think of that fit the same bill as him. I don't think there's any characters that I would really compare him to. I love Diggle, and I love the fact that we're seeing something more happen with him because I felt like over the last season or so, he's literally been like Oliver's fucking cheerleader or something. He needs to start writing like a Dear Dig column for all the fucking advice that he's shelling out. So I'm really glad that Diggle's doing something that's just for him. And I'm really excited to find out what's going on with that. And I hope that he's okay. Like, if Diggle dies, I'm gonna be so pissed. But I know that they won't do that because he's, like, been there from the beginning, right? Oh, you mean just like Laurel was. Oops. Obviously, Laurel coming back at the end. I'm not, like, at first, when I first saw it, I was like, wait, is that the same outfit that she was wearing in the hallucination? Because it's a different jacket, but it's, like, a similar type colour, like a light grey colour. And when I first saw it, I was like, whoa, is that the same outfit that she was wearing in Oliver's hallucination? Because if that was true, it would either be foreshadowing, like the hallucination itself in the previous episode would have been foreshadowing for this, or this Laurel could also be a hallucination. And I was actually so kind of sure. I actually went back and watched the last part of the 100th to make sure that it was a different outfit, and it was. I was wrong. It's a completely different outfit. But yeah, at first I thought this is just another hallucination. It's the same fucking outfit, but no, I was wrong. But then again, just because I was wrong about the outfit, that doesn't mean that this isn't also another hallucination. But given the episode title for coming back, like the after the winter break or whatever, it's called like Who Are You or something. So and Steven mentioned in his Facebook Live that there'd be a lot of kind of testing done because Team Arrow wouldn't just see this and just automatically believe, oh yeah, she's back from the dead. Like they wouldn't just take that at face value. There are things that there are concerns that would be raised that they would have. So they're obviously going to do things to ensure that this is Laurel, and we will find out if it is, because you know there are possibilities that it won't be. So I mean, I don't think it's going to be Black Siren. I mean, you could probably pose an argument that Black Siren like broke out and like dyed her hair in order to like impersonate Laurel. I don't know, like, but to be perfectly honest, I don't see that happening. I think that that would just be like really, really convoluted, and like, yeah, I think that that would just be too much. It would, like, I think that there are a lot of people who hate Laurel enough that they would still like be determined that that is what's happening. Like there are people who don't want Laurel to come back so much that they will support any theory that suggests that it's not her. So I'm sure that you could probably make an argument for that, but I don't think that that's happening. I don't know what's happening, and I think that that's, on the one hand, that's a really good thing, but on the other hand, that's a really bad thing. Because on the one hand, it keeps me on my toes because I don't know what's happening, right? And so there are probably like countless theories that you could pose as to why she's back and how it happened, if she even is back at all. But on the other hand, the writers have literally set nothing up that makes this kind of seem like it's organic. Like, honestly, I can't even fucking say the word organic anymore because Guggenheim's ruined it for me. But anyway, like, it doesn't... On the one hand, I think that, like, plot twists and cliffhangers are really, really good to keep people hooked and to keep people wanting to watch. But I also think that there needs to be, like, some kind of... Even if it's really subtle, there needs to be some kind of build-up to make a plot point believable, I guess. But considering that I watched Arrow100 and hadn't watched anything from 417 until then, it is likely that I've just missed subtleties that other people might have been able to pick up on looking back. So I don't know what's happening. I mean, I have no idea. This could be another hallucination in the sense that, like I said, Oliver was forced into a state of definite self-reflection because of Arrow100, and then again by killing Detective Malone he was forced into a state of self-reflection where he's got to consider the things that he's done have had ramifications on everyone around him, which I think was the whole point of Prometheus making him kill Detective Malone. It was like, and that kind of that montage where we see every character and the state of their lives as a result of their proximity to Oliver. I think that now that we've had 2 consecutive episodes of Oliver being forced into a position of thinking, I did this, or this happened because of something that I did. So going forward, I think that it will really develop Oliver, or at least it should if the writing is decent. Because, and if that does happen, then I think that we'll be seeing an Oliver that's very, very, don't want to say mature, but an Oliver that's kind of learnt from his mistakes, because he's now been forced to confront them a lot. And not only forced to confront them, but he has been shown a reality of what he could have had if he'd just thought a little bit before he did things. So I think we're going to see an Oliver that is a bit more methodical, someone who kind of considers situations a little bit more, maybe. I hope that they use this to really develop him, because I think that a lot of things seem to happen to or around Oliver, but he doesn't learn from his mistakes. I think that season 1, when Tommy died at the end of season 1 and Oliver made that vow to stop killing people, and for most of season 2, like, it was really like season 2 ended with Oliver sparing Slade's life and imprisoning him instead of killing him, which I think was a huge culmination of everything that he'd learnt, and him upholding Tommy's memory by ensuring that even when he very easily, with no remorse, could have killed Slade, he chose not to. And I thought that was a really great development, and it was something that was consistent through season, like, it was a huge progression going from the finale of season 1 to the finale of season 2. And I think that they kind of lost that, and they went back on that a little bit in seasons 3 and 4. So I really hope that they give Oliver like a driving motivation in this season that is kind of, it reaches its kind of peak, I guess, in the finale. So yeah, I'm optimistic about this. I was going to talk about some Olicity controversy that's been going around due to statements made by both Stephen and Mark, but this video is longer than I wanted it to be, so I'll probably make a different one. Okay, so anyone who's been watching the show who maybe has some interesting theories about Laurel's sudden reappearance, that would be awesome. Let me know.